Welcome to Season 2 of Barn Fresh, a motorcycle restoration. If you followed along in Season 1, you saw me completely restore to a factory original 1970 F9 Bighorn, as you see here. From start to finish, from pulling it out of the barn to the finished product you see here. And along with that bike, you may have noticed that I had pulled out two other bikes, and that's what I'm going to use for the basis of the bike in this next series. We're going to take both of these bikes and make one. However, we're not going to restore them to factory original. The focus of this series is going to be on creating somewhat of a vintage motocross bike using parts from both bikes, because actually savvy viewers might have noticed that there's an aftermarket expansion chamber on here, and I'm told this is a Bassani. Somebody will correct me out there if I'm wrong. So we're going to probably use that. There's some aftermarket shocks here that look like they're rebuildable, so we might use those because they're probably better than these factory ones that are similar to what they put on the street bikes of the day. And that's what we're doing. We're going to take kind of the average guy approach to building a vintage motocross bike, similarly to what the average guy that may have had a Bighorn back in the day and decided I want to try getting into racing, but I don't want to plunk down $1,000 or more for a dedicated race bike at the time. So focus on this series will be basically somewhat performance based, but generally just making a good, reliable, strictly dirt bike. So that means we're going to probably be taking all the lights off, gauges, instrumentation, anything that we don't need. Probably replace bars, controls, and things like that. Probably take some liberties here and there just for ease of sourcing parts. For example, like handlebars. Probably go to a modern aluminum bar. Same with controls. Go to modern universal controls. We'll try to do some weight savings where we can, like obviously eliminating things like a kickstand, various brackets that won't be needed when we strip down. Probably go to plastic fenders and things. Probably won't do any major things like, probably won't do any fab work or anything. Just keep it relatively stock, but we may do some engine modifications to the cylinder and things like that, or the rotary valve disc. I don't know. Honestly, this series is going to be more of an update type series. I mean, I'll show you some how-to obviously sprinkled in there like I always do, but this will mostly be kind of what I'm going to do, where the project's going, what obstacles I have encountered, and then how I either overcome them and whatnot. So this is going to be a little different take. I think some of you out there will like it because I know some people definitely probably would like to see a performance build on something other than maybe a modern bike. Those videos are all out there. So I hope you like this series. I'm excited to get started on it. So until next time, like my Facebook page, check out the website, and watch the first series. And thanks for watching. Welcome back to the shop here. As you can see, we're midway through our disassembly here. I got the engine out, I got the engine covers off so I can start some inspection and replacement of parts. As you can see, here's the clutch cover here. Needs cleaned up. And it looks like I got a mess going here. I got parts and I got tools scattered everywhere. This is the reality of doing something like this, especially in your own garage here. You're just eager to get going here. And believe me, there is a method to the madness here. But we got a lot to do. Still got some things to remove and tear down, because we're going to get to the forks. We're going to go deeper into the engine here and replace and maybe modify a few things. And we got the carburetor to deal with, to repair. Got some, I have two of everything, because I have two of these F9s. If you saw Barn Fresh episode 1, you saw me pull two other bikes out with the one that I restored to factory, the F9, that you can see behind me here. So I have two of everything. So I'm going to set one up to be kind of back to factory specs, kind of engine-wise, and then I'm going to, since I got two cylinders and things, I am going to cut the rotary valve disc and also probably do some porting, and so I can have two different configurations. And what I'm going to show you next is I'm going to show you some of the parts that I've already got ready for this bike, and we're going to go through that and show you what I've got and kind of where this project is going to go. Over here on the workbench here, I got some of the parts that I'm going to use laid out here, and I thought I'd kind of go through them. A lot of this is just normal replacement stuff. Some of it is still available from the OEM because a lot of the part numbers crossed to many bikes through many years. Some of it is new old stock that's obsolete, but was able to find it. And then some things I just had laying around. So I'll just kind of start over here. Obviously, you saw this this kind of stuff in the original series. You know, because I have two bikes, I have two ignition control modules, which those are kind of hard to find, especially as new old stock. Same with ignition coils and everything, which all those test good. The other thing is, and this is out of the bike I'm currently working on. This is the actual. It has the lighting and then the exciter and signal coils here. And you know, it's a little rusty because there was actually water laying in here. I'll probably soak this in some rust dissolving compound, the Evapo-Rust, because it won't harm any of the electrics here. But I already tested this per the manual, and you saw how to do that in the other series. And this is actually tests good, so when I put this back together, I should have no trouble getting spark. So just showing you that there. Obviously, this is an aftermarket one, but I need another gasket kit because I'm going to need, you know, the gaskets. I got a brand new set of piston rings that are oversized, and those are new old stock. And actually, I have a new old stock oversized piston here. We got a couple other. These are still factory stock items, as you can kind of see by the differences in the labels. Mainly just seals, like this is the kick shaft seal. This is a shift shaft seal, which requires two of them because you have one on either side of the engine on or transmission on this bike for right or left side shifting. Got a ignition side or right or left side crank seal because I'm going to replace that. Here's the right side or the rotary valve cover crank seal because I'm going to have it off. I'm going to replace that, even though the one that's in it looks decent. You know, it's been sitting a while, and I would hate to burn up a new piston just because of some fairly easily replaced seals. And then of course these other ones, it's just so I don't have a leaker on the ground there. Brand new. This is still available from the factory. That's the little end bearing. In front of me, I have both cylinders off each bike. I've cleaned this, or begun to clean this one up. Took the exhaust off. This is probably the one I'll keep as a stock configuration. This is one that I will probably do some porting on. Either I'll send it out or I'll try doing it myself. I haven't decided yet on that, honestly. But both of these here, and I have some numbers I've written on here. Identify which bike they came from, just for posterity, and then also what the specs are. Other things that are a little more performance related are one of the bikes actually came with period aftermarket aluminum foot pegs, so they're a heck of a lot lighter than the stalkers. So I'm going to, you know, and they're not really that beat up. They got a little bit of wear on them, but that gives it a little bit of character. But I'm going to use those. And another thing that actually came off of one of the bikes that the guy must have set up for racing is this is the countershaft cover, which also houses the that's what this is in here. It actually houses what actuates the clutch. Well, as you can see, the previous owners did kind of a half-assed job, but he kind of notched this out. And I'm thinking not so much for weight savings, although it does take off some weight because there's a lot of casting that was removed here. but still retained some of the rigidity here. So for this mount over here, which is required, I can't just lop that off, because there is some pressure here from the clutch actuating, because your clutch cable goes in here. Anyways, probably what he did this for is because, you know, in a muddy situation, the mud balls up in here, and while this would let the mud fall out, or after a race or a ride, you could at least get in there with a screwdriver and kind of pry it out of there, as well as actually has a period correct what we know now is a case saver, which originally didn't come on these bikes. So that's kind of nice, and that also helps you be able to clean it out, because mud can pack around in there as well. So actually that's kind of a neat deal that the previous owner did, and I'm going to just kind of improve on it, make the cut, or what he cut, a little bit nicer like this. I'm going to square it off, make it look like it kind of was going to be factory. They kind of a hack job. Well, I want to show you one other part that I'm going to replace on this bike. Here's the stock expansion chamber or muffler for the F9, and this thing is heavy. Now I weighed this thing, and this thing weighs a whopping 14.8 pounds, almost 15 pounds right here, and it feels like it. It's heavy. And like I said, when you saw the first episode here, you also saw that I do have a fairly rare aftermarket expansion chamber here, and I have confirmed this is a Bassani, and this is custom built for the F9. It's supposedly a pretty good pipe, one of the quieter ones out there. It does have kind of a packing insert in here, and but it's supposed to you know, broaden the power range, maybe give a little bit extra higher RPM power without losing your low end because of the rotary valve. And but I weighed this thing, and this thing's light. This thing weighs about, it weighs like 7.8 pounds. Call it 8 pounds. And so that's a significant weight savings right there. I mean, this is probably one of the biggest things outside of the fenders, which we'll get to that in another episode, that's going to drastically reduce the weight of this bike and make it handle a heck of a lot better. Especially because, like on these older bikes, you know, the exhaust sit up high, so a lot of your weight is up high. So the less weight you can have up high lowers the center of gravity, and helps, you know, things like the shocks and everything work a lot better. So this is one of the major things, and that I think is pretty neat, that I'm going to have, you know, a period correct aftermarket pipe to put on this bike. But as you can see here, here's a handful of parts that I'm going to use to refurbish this bike. And like I said, it's kind of nice I have two bikes, because I can kind of play around with some performance aspects with one, and then keep the other for, if this doesn't work out, I can, you know, kind of keep it more of a stock configuration. But still, we're going to do some little weight savings things, and to make this bike handle or run as good as it can. Well, welcome back. Got the engine out onto my bench here, and we're going to start disassembling it and going through some of the things we're going to slightly modify or replace or improve. What we're going to do here, and it's a little trick that I've picked up over the years, is I'm going to just polish up and clean up the surfaces where the fiber plates run, and shine them up, make them real shiny and smooth, and that way the plates won't catch. When you release the clutch, and when the plates can't move a little bit to release their friction, to allow you to change gears or stop at a stoplight, or when you're first starting out, when you click it into first gear and you hear that clunk, well, that means one of the plates is stuck, or there's a little bit of friction here, and the transmission's still spinning a little bit even though you're stationary, and there's some drag in here. And well, I want to try to eliminate that. But you can only do this if the fingers are like this one, where they're really clean and not really worn. If it's bad, if you can feel some ridges in there, you can't do this. You're going to have to replace it, because while you could file down those ridges or grind down those ridges, you're going to open up the space between each one of these fingers here, which is going to cause a lot of clutch noise, and that's going to be the plates are going like this in between here and clanking back and forth. A lot of older bikes had a lot of clearance, and that was a common complaint back in the 60s, is while you're sitting there idling, you'd hear kind of a clank, 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 clank. And all that was the plates going back and forth. Back in the day when manufacturing tolerances weren't as stringent, they put a lot of clearance in there, so when you release the clutch, it actually released and not lurched forward when you put it into gear, and that causes stress on the transmission and everything. So that's one of the things we're going to do here with this to kind of improve clutch action on this bike. Moving on with our engine here, the next thing all we got to do is take off the rotary valve cover. Now I've removed all the bolts, and it's just held on with those bolts and slides off. We're also going to replace this seal. It looks in real good shape, but it's still available and it's easy to replace. So we're going to take that off. And now you can see really the part of this engine that makes this engine unique and makes it work and have so much low-end power at low RPMs for a two-stroke. And I'm going to spin it around here. As you can see, as the crankshaft moves, the disc moves and opens and closes the intake port here. And what we're going to do, and this just slides off. It is keyed onto the crankshaft by a dowel pin here. You can also see the crank bearing back there. And what we're going to do here is there's some specifications. We're going to trim these two edges of the rotary valve disc to increase the intake duration. It's also going to open the intake port a little sooner and close it a little later to allow more fuel and more air into the engine over a longer period of time, which is going to increase performance and increase a little bit of top end power. Also, you can see here's our intake port. There's also a channel down here that goes down behind. It's kind of allow because this is an open bearing, it's pressurized behind here. This allows lubricating oil and such from the air fuel mix to get down in here into that bearing and everything. But also what we're going to do is we're also going to match these two openings, and I'm going to show you in just a second here what I mean by that. But right in here, I'll do a close-up. There's some casting. When they cast this, there's a kind of a ridge right here. We're going to just kind of clean those up, and then we're going to match it to these, because when I stick this on here, I can feel when I stick my finger in there, I can feel a slight ridge in there, which is going to create turbulence while the engine is running and compromise a little bit of power. As you can see right here, there's a little bit of a lip, and it doesn't look like much. When you got the intake gases and air flowing through there, this creates a lot of turbulence. It can create a little bit of pooling right here of the air fuel intake mixture, and we're just gonna take off a little bit, and this ridge here can create a little bit of turbulence. We're gonna just take this down a little bit to make these match, smooth this across, and then also this part right here, this little transition, we're just gonna smooth it up a little bit here, and then also way inside there's also where they made this bore here, they made a little bit of a lip, and there's some turbulence here. So there's actually two steps that the air has to step off of that can create turbulence and pooling of the fuel. We're not looking to actually open this up and make it bigger. We're just looking to match this to the casing right here. And we don't want to necessarily polish it up. We want to leave it rough because that helps with fuel atomization. We just want the smoothest possible flow we can get in each of these transitions. Okay, now that you know kind of what we're going to do here, let's talk about the tools we're going to use to do this. Probably the tool that most people are going to have around is some type of rotary tool like this, also known as a Dremel tool. They take small stones such as this or this, and they can even take small little like diamond tipped stones and carbide stones, rotary files, all different kinds of things. We're going to use some of these small ones that are real super fine abrasive for, they're almost used exclusively for like polishing. We're going to use those to polish these edges here on our clutch basket like I talked about earlier. Actually kind of a big one, but we're probably going to just kind of finish up, just take off any burrs or something with a medium cross buff. We're not going to really polish with this, but we just want to take off, kind of deburr after we get done finishing. And you know, if you don't have a Dremel tool, but you do have a die grinder, either right angle or straight, you know, either kind is going to probably work in this operation. You know, you can use grinding stones and things and rotary files on this too. Just you know, even a common household electric drill can work for this operation. It might be slower and not as fine. You won't have the control as you would with a tool like this or even your die grinder. So, but it can be done. Now you're probably asking, how in the world are we going to mark for where we need to cut this? Because as you saw in that last shot, we need to cut this down a little bit, and how are we going to know? When it's in there, we can't probably get our tool in through each one of these ways very easily. Well, little trick that I've picked up is, this happens to be just some scratch fix that I have, but it doesn't matter what color it is. I just chose white because it's going to show up easy. It's got a brush on here. All you're going to do is you're going to brush a little paint on the outside of this area here, well on the outside, because you can take it off later, so don't worry about being sloppy. And then let it dry, of course, and then stick it on there, and then from the opposite side take a very sharp awl with a very sharp point on it, and in through your port there, you're going to, from the other side, you're going to be scratching right around the edge, and you're going to make a line and you're going to scratch the paint off there. And so when you take it off, you're going to have a nice scratch line that you can run your little grinding tool from this side. Instead of having to come through here, you can grind until you get to your scratch line, and you can keep putting it back on and off, and checking with your finger to see if you've gone far enough. If you've gone too far, then you're going to have to kind of finish this a little bit. Now on this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the finishing in here just a bit, because there is a step place there. Then I will do this cover and match them that way. Well, that's what we're going to do to kind of improve some performance here. We're going to do the same thing on the cylinder with the exhaust manifold where the pipe bolts up. It doesn't match exactly. And of course on the exhaust we're gonna polish it all up. We're also gonna raise the exhaust port just a little bit using some of the same techniques here, and I'll probably show you that later. But that's about it for this time, so I'm gonna get to it, and next time we're gonna move on to doing the cylinder. Well, welcome back. We're about partway through our pre-assembly of the F9 project. Well, success. We got it to fire up and run for a little while. As you can see, I don't have a throttle yet. It's still on order. It's on back order. So you can see I was operating it by pulling the cable, and I was having a hard time modulating the throttle. Plus, we have a choke cable because these rotary valve engines, the carburetor sealed behind a cover. So obviously there's a little cable that you got to pull on top that's operated by lever, and on this bike it's integrated into like the turn signal switch and everything that was on this bike that we got rid of. So I got to figure out a way to do that because we got to be able to have an enrichment type of device to get this going easier. So actually I'm pretty surprised it started up really with no choke. I just squirted just a little bit of fuel into the crankcase there, and I cranked the idle speed screw all the way up to raise the slide as much as possible there. And obviously, you heard it run sounded like it run pretty good, and I was trying to modulate the RPMs there. And it's a cold engine, you gotta warm it up, and my had some vice grips on the cable to hold the choke open, and they must have slipped and let the choke fall, and it wasn't warmed up enough to keep her running. So and then of course I've just got the carburetor specs back to factory, with the modifications here. I don't know how close that is, so that's some tuning I'm going to have to do. But once I get a throttle here, it'll be easy to kickstart, modulate the throttle, kind of keep her running, as you would till we warm her up, and then I can kind of see where everything needs to go. But oh, and another thing, which I didn't have the camera running when I was doing that, is my kickstart bolt broke, and I'm going to show you that real quick right here and show you what I mean. It's a pretty piss poor design, and the magazines for both bikes, the F81M, both Bighorns, complained about this kickstart lever because it's just there's no spring on it, and it's just a overly complicated design to do a pretty simple job, and I'll show you that right now. Okay, we're looking at our fixed kickstart lever assembly here. This is the stock lever and mounting boss. Of course, because I have multiple bikes, I have multiple parts. Here's just this part here, and if you'll notice, you probably can't see, but it's threaded in here and not in here. And here's the original bolt right here that broke off. So this would have fit through here, rode in there, and there would have been a brass or bronze bushing in here, and then it just rides in here. And of course, years of turning like this, and then all the leverage that gets put here and here. Obviously this was bent before it started, and then it snapped off here. Pretty poor design, and this is something in the magazines that they complained about. There's no spring that holds this from flopping out. I mean, it stays there pretty good, just because of friction in here. But even from the factory, there's little blobs of weld here as the stop for that, which is kind of a poor design. Magazines complained about it, complained mud would pack in there, and then you couldn't get it out when you wanted to restart it. And then also bouncing around, it could fall like that. I mean, of course, your leg's right there, and it kind of sticks out here too. There's definitely better ones out there. This is one off of another bike. I mean, this is the more common way they're done. This one will fit on there, but the way the mounting bolt is sticks in here, and the way it would have to be when it kicks clear around, the mounting bolt will hit the case in here, and so I can't use that one. I thought I could use that. That's off of, I think, a Yamaha or Suzuki or something, you know, because the splines are all the same throughout the years. So I kind of had to devise a better system here. Threaded this here, so there's good support here, and a nylon bushing here. You can't see it, but a little nylon bushing. I drilled that out here, put one there, and then that bushing fits snug in there. Of course, this one is worse than that, and you can see the holes kind of egged there. This one isn't as bad, so the bushing takes up the slop, and there really is almost no slop. Of course, you're going to have just a little bit, as usual. I mean, even these styles have a little bit of slop, but there's a little, you know, detent that keeps this one from wanting to fall out, unlike this. So, you know, this is something they never improved over 5 years. Probably the single most aggravating part of this bike. All right, well, there it is. You heard it run. Of course, we got to get the body work on. I got to get some new tires. Still clean up the rims. I mean, they look pretty good, but they just need cleaned up. Little elbow grease shining them up there. So, actually, next time you see this, it'll be a finished bike. Well, here's the finished bike. But let's take a recap and see how we got here. Recap, let's go over what we actually did to this bike. Well, let's go through some of the modifications that we did here. Some of the most visual cues from the original bike is obviously the fenders. Went to plastic fenders front and rear, getting rid of the heavy old steel fenders front and rear. F9 had steel fenders. The F5, like behind me, had aluminum fenders, but obviously if you're going to go racing or build something that's going to go racing, you can eliminate a lot more weight with the plastic fenders. Same thing, you know, adding number plates if we're going racing here. Got rid of the headlight, tachometer, speedometer, all that weight way up high here. Built a bracket off of the little tabs for the gauges. Put a front number plate on. Side number plate, same thing. Probably about the only place to put it here. Just got some welded some tabs to the frame and put some bolts to mount that there. Also, big cue, which you've seen if you've been watching the other series, is this expansion chamber. Cleaned it up, painted up some high temp paint. Got a rare sticker and put that on it because it's a Bassani, so we got factory correct there. This eliminated a lot of weight that's held up high. Big long kind of pipe and expansion chamber here, so this one's a lot quieter than some other designs that were made for this bike. And I'm told it does broaden out the power, especially up high with this extra length there. Added the red tip just kind of to set it off. I don't know if that's factory. I've heard it might be, but anyway, I wanted it that way, so that's why that is. That's my personal touch. Going back to the fenders here, I thought every 70s bike, you know, needs the fender flappers here, mud flaps. These are period pieces, front and rear, you know, because these fenders didn't really cover a whole lot. So this is, and you know, you see in the old videos and things, you know, these things flapping in the wind. I don't know, that's just kind of an aesthetic thing. Seat, we rebuilt the foam, and you've seen that in the other series. New seat cover and everything. Bars, aluminum bars, new grips. We took a little liberty by putting aluminum bars on here just for kind of ease. The factory steel chrome ones are kind of flimsy, and they're not a very good bend for motocross or racing. You don't got as much leverage, and they're kind of tucked in tight to you. So this opens up the cockpit a lot more, gives you a lot more leverage for when you're needing to counter steer really hard. Well, here we are on the other side of the bike here, and this is pretty much the business end for a rotary valve engine because the carburetor's on this side. We'll start down here with the carburetor. You'll notice this screen here, and actually these parts here come stock on the F81M, and to add them to this, it's pretty simple. You just cut out a hole in the carburetor cover, drill some holes, put these bolts in. There's a gasket, this screen, and then there's some filter media behind it. Not from the factory. I actually put in a little foam piece behind there because I thought this screen and the little bit of media they had impregnated in it just didn't seem good enough for me, especially where I will ride this bike a little bit. I don't want to be sucking a lot of dirt and sand in there. Downfall of doing this, obviously, is if you ride in a lot of creek crossings and things, you know, you obviously can't submerge the engine up there. You're going to just get water in there, whereas factory cover, you know, you can basically go this deep in water because the air intake is up here just under the seat. And that's something you can see down here, this little hose. That's a drain for just in case the carburetor floods or you do get some water in there. It can at least drain out there and it doesn't fill up in the carburetor cover there, or carburetor chamber there. The other thing, obviously, we didn't want to run that old vacuum petcock. Went to just a standard one like you'd find on any other bike. This actually happens to be like a Harley Sportster. The left side tank, because there's two of them on that, because it fits this 22 millimeter thread on here. So there's a little tip for you if you have a bighorn or anything with a 22 millimeter thread. This will thread right into it nice. It's a nice add-on. Nice little chrome piece. You know, some people might, for authenticity, would probably bead blast this, kind of take the shine off of it, but I don't care. I kept the oil tank actually because there's conflicting reports on, you know, removing it because the oil pump does lubricate the this right side main bearing in here, and the oil pump cable is unhooked, so it's feeding it at idle. So it's feeding a little bit of oil mostly into there. I've blocked it off from going into the intake. We'll run premix in here. And actually, per the speed kit manual, that's actually how they recommended that for the F5, how to run it. So that's what I'm doing here. I guess I just want to know that that main bearing's getting lubricated, and I'll adjust my jetting and premix accordingly for that tiniest little bit of oil that does get sucked into the crankcase. Obviously, we put a number plate on this side too. Same deal. Put some tabs, tap some holes into like the rear subframe here with some spacers, spaced it out, and you know, it's pretty well out of the way here. your leg doesn't rub on it. However, you can see some marks from my boot from kickstarting it. And one thing about that kickstart, my fix didn't work, or it failed, or the kickstart lever was kind of cracked. I don't know. More on that later, but you'll notice the Kickstarter's not here, so I can't start the bike right now. I had it running, obviously, and rode it around a little bit because you can see there's some dirt and such on the tires. So more on that later. Watch that for another video because I have a fix for that, just not at the time I filmed this. You also notice I got the, these are period correct aluminum foot pegs that fit right into the factory brackets. You know, neat period piece. I didn't really clean them up too much or try to make them look pretty because, you know, their foot pegs are going to get damaged up. It gives a little bit of character to the bike. You'll notice these orange things, these orange shocks on the back here. These are, you can check my website for more information on these. Rebuilt these, painted them all up into as close to the factory color of these. These are Mulholland shocks. I rebuilt them. They're rebuildable. They're actually tunable, and I just put them back whatever they were. And I have some other parts like I changed the tuning, but once I get to riding it, I'll see if I want to mess with them or see how well they work. Same with the springs. They're the factory springs that were on it. When I sit on it and adjust this and check the sag, they seem to be right, just about right for my weight. So I might not have to get new springs, but that's a pretty easy fix or upgrade. Aftermarket springs companies have them. Well, I mean, that's pretty much the bike right there. I mean, you saw in all the other videos, and if you haven't watched those, some of the modifications we did, porting the cylinder a little bit, port matching and gasket matching and everything. The only thing that's bone stock is the ignition and flywheel, the heavy flywheel. That might be something I might tackle in the future a little bit, is maybe lightening up that flywheel or putting a different ignition system on, because I hear there is other ones you can use. But that's the other thing about this bike. It's not truly finished because there's still a lot of other things I want to try, like the forks. I rebuild them as far as seals, and they weren't really that worn, and bushings, but I'm going to modify them, probably put in some emulators from Race Tech in there. I've heard those things are pretty good. Same with other things with the cylinder. I might do that. And of course I got another frame for this bike, and I might do some frame modifications as far as changing the steering head angle, lengthening it just a little bit. On my website you can find a page that talks a little bit about some of the upgrades that you can do to this bike. And a lot of these little performance tips that you've seen in this series can be applied to a lot of different vintage bikes and even modern bikes. The principles are the same. I just chose to show it on this bike here. So that's not all you're going to see of this bike. In the future I will make some videos. We'll definitely get a ride video in here, but like I said, I got to fix my Kickstarter and kind of beef it up, maybe make it a little bit better or put a different design on there. Like I said, I got a fix for the factory one, but I might look into modifying one for a different bike that'll make it work. Well, that's about it. That's everything. You know, if you stumble onto this video and you watch this one and you like what you see here, go back and watch the other videos and watch my other barn fresh restoration of factory correct F9 restoration. So until next time, like the Facebook page, check out the website, and thanks for watching.